primary care, starts with the parent. The parent has to be the one to make that decision to go to the ER, to call the pediatrician or triage it at home. In many cases, we know 40% of ER visits are avoidable, preventable if they just have the information at home. So we we see Avocado Health as a parent coach in your pocket, yes, but it really is a parent decision support platform.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Mom Essentials. Becoming a parent means that you are going to be flooded with questions, but they don't just come in the middle of the day when everything's going right. They can pop up anytime, including 3 o'clock in the morning. So where do you go? What do you do? Well, of course, you could go to ChatGPT or you could go search on good old Google, but you're not really sure what kind of answers you're going to find there. But what if you had parenting advice in the back of your pocket at any time of the day? Well, the good news is you can. I'm so excited to welcome and introduce you all to my guest today, Hans Kullberg. Hans is the father of 5, a serial exit entrepreneur, and the CEO and co-founder behind Avocado Health, a real-time parent decision support platform known as the parent coach in your pocket, delivering evidence-based proactive guidance and support via text message. Avocado's team of pediatricians, early childhood specialists, therapists, and parent coaches designed the platform to give parents immediate, compassionate support wherever they need it, answering all the questions, big and small. His drive to build Avocado comes from his personal journey seeking answers for his daughter, Aviva, which fuels his mission to ensure no parent faces uncertainty alone. So thank you and welcome, Hans, to Mom Essentials.
Thank you so much, Angie. It's really great to be here, and thank you for that background and introduction. So,
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think, again, when you know that you're having a baby, obviously you're an awesome dad. We have a lot of moms on here, but I love when I can have dads on here to give some cool perspectives. You're kind of flooded with all these concerns and worries. And then the baby gets here. And I always joke about when we had our twins, I was like, who let me leave a hospital with 2 babies? Like, who thought that that was a good idea? Because they're like, good luck, like best wishes, but you get home and you're like, well, what if this isn't normal? Or what do we do if this happens? And you're right, like there wasn't really anything before, but now you have this really cool text-based platform that you're going to share with my listeners here in a little bit about how they can get that real-time advice in a matter of seconds, it kind of sounds like. So I can't wait for you to share more about Avocado Health, but I would love for you to talk a little bit at the beginning here, just a little bit more of your journey and what led you to finding this platform.
yeah, so that's, certainly a loaded question, but really thank you for asking that. And I would say, first and foremost, dads also have all of those concerns. It's not just moms,
Yeah.
for sure. But parenting is something that I take, as my number one responsibility. I knew ever since I was a kid myself that I wanted to be a dad. I used to try to like think about, the types of things that I would do with my kids and the meals I would serve and everything else. And so I was a weird kid in that regard, but when we realized that we had our first child on the way, super anxious, super excited. It's kind of like jumping out of an airplane. If you've ever been skydiving, it's, you have all these different emotions and mixed feelings. But for me, it's such a blessing and that awe-inspiring moment that you hold your child for the very first time. As most parents can kind of relate, it's this, second chapter of your life. It's this feeling that, now you're the sole primary, with your partner, maybe, uh, caretaker and primary caregiver for this, little human, that is super fragile at that very early stage. And so, um, really the desire to build Avocado Health, I think the seeds were planted then, even before then. But for us, it was really more about the experience that we had with our third child, our daughter Aviva, who was born full term, fully healthy, and everything was completely normal. We were overjoyed and blessed at that point in time. But in her second week of life, she woke up from a nap. She was lethargic. She was cold to the touch, 95 degrees. We knew something was wrong when she wasn't breastfeeding. And so we took her directly to the hospital. They admitted her to the neonatal intensive care unit. They did a whole battery of tests. They even did a lumbar puncture, which is really a spinal tap. And we waited for a week for there to be any kind of signs of or semblance of answers. um, we didn't get those answers, and they released her, fully healthy, fully recovered after that 1 week under observations. Over the next 10 months, she was in and out of the hospital 5 other times, so 6 times total, each time 3 to 6 days, 7 days at a time, and all with the same type of conditions. And so we eventually learned that she had this episodic bradycardia. Bradycardia means slow heart rate. So heart rate went down to about 60 beats a minute versus about 150. But we saw dozens of different ologists, I call them. So cardiologists, neurologists, mitochondrial specialists, a lot of different um, experts, sitting around the room, scratching their heads, shrugging their shoulders. They didn't really know what was happening. And so she never really had a diagnosis. And if you know anything about healthcare, that's where the journey really starts. You have to have a diagnosis. And so for us, um, unfortunately and tragically, her sixth hospitalization was her last. It was a little bit different. She was vomiting, preceding going to the hospital. There's a lot of other things that happened there, but she ended up having higher levels of potassium in her bloodstream. They gave her some medication to reduce that, and it had the opposite effect. Her heart stopped almost immediately. Her organs start shutting down. They put her on life support. They did CPR. They put her on an ECMO machine um, to really keep her alive. And we waited for the next 20 hours for a miracle to occur, but that miracle for us never came. And we lost our daughter in November 18th, 2020. Certainly the hardest day of our life, hardest thing that any parent can ever go through. Um, and as I held my daughter for the last time, I told her that daddy doesn't know what happened, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure no other parent has to go through that and feel that way. And really, that's where this journey started. That's my promise to my daughter. I took about 12 months off to embrace the grieving process, which is really important. If anyone's grieving out there, we know that loss, especially of a child, miscarriage, yeah, there's so many different things that can happen, is really tremendous, and it has a tremendous effect on us as human beings, psychologically, and how we process that, how we handle that. It's very different, very unique for everybody. But we also know that grief changes you, good, bad, and the ugly, right? There's lots of different things that can happen. And for me, this journey that I'm on really started by harnessing that grief and really trying to find meaning in her life and find a meaningful way to help support parents and impact, um, you know, their parenthood journey, their child, their family, because it is the most precious gift that we have, and it is the most important job that we hold as parents. But um, almost any parent I can't think of any parent that wouldn't want a little bit more help and support. But really, that starts with answers, and so that's what Avocado Health is doing.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know I'm sure my listeners probably teared up a little bit. I did as well. I had goosebumps as you were sharing it. And of course, we can't really say anything, except like, I'm so sorry that your family went through that. And, so grateful for you and your wife to develop this in honor of your daughter so that other parents can feel that support, especially if they have been looking for answers and haven't been able to find it because as you kind of just said, like the healthcare system, it can be really frustrating for parents, especially if you're not getting the answers that you want or you feel like you're trying to advocate, but maybe not getting people to listen to you. So, again, so sorry that your family has gone through that. And what a beautiful gift in memory and honor of your daughter by creating this platform for everyone. So,
Thank you. Thanks so much.
yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah. I was just going to say, just to add to what you said, we know that health really happens in between those healthcare visits, right? And you talked about the healthcare system. There's lots of things we can say about that. At the end of the day, it's not the best, it's not perfect. Um, but We also know that providers, doctors, nurses, therapists, have very limited time. Everyone's stressed. No one has, an extra 30 minutes here or 60 minutes here, but many times they've gone out into that profession, with that noble goal of trying to help people. And so we take that adage of, let's not focus on what there's a shortage of, right? There's a shortage of providers, there's a shortage of time, but how can we actually harness what we have an abundance of? And we have an abundance of parents that spend a lot of time with their child, that know their child, and that love their child, right? And they just need a little bit more knowledge. They just need a little bit more support. Sometimes it's just an affirmation. Sometimes it's a proactive guidance around milestones, around your pregnancy journey, because we know small things that mothers and fathers can advocate for can actually make a big difference, whether it's, we're talking about maternal morbidity or a neonatal intensive care unit stay or a delayed diagnosis of autism or developmental or behavioral delay, teenage anxiety, right? We know there's things that we can do even up front about that. And so, there's such a profound run-on implication of whether that parent actually has that knowledge and also that confidence, the confidence and the self-efficacy to ensure that they're making the right decision. Because we know as parents, sometimes there's no right or wrong decision. It's all different shades of gray. No allusion to the book. But from that perspective, knowing that, you know, the decisions that parents make and the actions they take certainly have a profound impact implication on the lifelong journey of that child,
Yeah.
health wise, mental, physical, but also education, economic, the whole well-being, right? And so empowering them with that level of agency so they can be the best advocate for the child
Yeah.
is fundamental, and that's critical to our mission. It's actually in our name. Avocado really comes from advocate, just a play on words.
I
So
love it. I love it. And I love that mission because I talk a lot about how we live in a very reactive society too. And sometimes we don't know how to be proactive or maybe don't have the proper tools to be proactive. But obviously, Avocado Health is one of those proactive tools because it really is at your fingertips at all times. And, I think as you're right, like we could go on and on about healthcare and whatnot, but let's try focus on the abundance of things that we have, like tools and strategies like this, in order to help us feel the most confident as a parent as we can, whether you're a mom or a dad. And so obviously there's been a lot of changes over the last couple generations of just things that we're aware of, more research coming out. But obviously there's been a lot of changes too that can be positive and negative in parenting nowadays. So what do you really think like real like parent support looks like in the modern age right now?
yeah, so it's it's very simple. Real parenting support is a combination of both human support, and that empathy is really important, as well as technology, right? We live in a world where what AI is doing is really being able to distill vast amounts of information in a very easily consumable manner. What we have a deficit of is time and attention, right? Our attention spans are like goldfish. We have,
Yeah.
so many different directions, but where we see parents actually going to get that support is actually Google, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Reddit boards, Facebook, all the social media online. And now we have ChatGPT, we have, the LLMs, obviously. And other times they're also texting their parents, texting their friends, what should I do in this situation? And if you think about that, it's really taking that user behavior of, they're going there because it's accessible. It's right there on their phone, in the palm of their hands at 2 in the morning when their baby isn't sleeping or their toddler has a 1 or 2 degree fever. What do you do, right? Ideally, they love to pick up the phone or text their pediatrician or get an appointment, but just getting in front of them takes days, if not weeks,
Yeah.
at a time. It's maddeningly frustrating, no matter who you are, what, what priority you have, it's really difficult to get in front of your primary care or other provider. And so there's a huge gap between, um, evidence-based, experts, evidence-based information and accessible information. What Avocado Health is really doing is bridging that gap by bringing parents the right information at the right time, backed by clinical research, evidence base from centers of excellence like American Academy of Pediatrics or American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologist or 0 to 3 or Child Minus 2. There's lots of really great information for parents out there online, but what what matters is really that user behavior. And we've really studied, how parents actually access the information, ask them, what would actually be the best format. It's not a mobile app. We know we have hundreds of mobile apps on our phone. I do, and I
Mhm.
use maybe like five of them, right? But I use my text message every single day. And that's something that I don't really miss a message in my inbox. By the end of the day, we know that 95% of messages are read within the first 20 minutes alone. And that's important because, if you're sending a message into the ether and people aren't reading them, using them, then it's very low utility. What we want to do is really build a very high engaging, experience with avocado, but not bombarding you with information. It's really just the small bite-sized little nuggets of, hey, your child is 6 months old. They might start banging two blocks together, and this is why it's developmentally important. And here's a activity that you can do to help strengthen, that development. Your child might be looking in your eyes, or they might be doing a pincer grip, right? Different stages, different milestones across different ages, but parents, in this example, like should be informed and want to be informed. But
Yeah.
the way that we do it right now, we have long 3 months, 6 months, 12 months between a lot of these well child visits, and that just doesn't do it justice at all.
Yeah, because like we started talking about, they come up out of nowhere. I mean, and sometimes like the absolute worst time of the day, it's all of a sudden my kid has a fever or this is happening and I'm not sure what's going on. And I like how you guys have bridged the gap. You're right. Like we all are inundated with apps so many times. And when you were like, I have, so many on my phone and I probably use like five. My husband makes fun of me all the time when I go into like my phone to like start closing apps because I
Yeah.
have like a million screens. He's like, how
Yeah.
can you have that many open? I was like, I don't know. I just open it once and then I forget about it. And no wonder my phone is slow. But you're right. Like I will go to my text messages first if I see something come in because it's just that quick, easy usage of it. And I think that there's definitely this fine line of social media, right? Like
Mhm.
people like for example like Facebook groups, right? Like those are still very popular, especially like when I was pregnant with my twins. I was a part of like special like moms of multiple groups, and they were amazing because it kind of made you feel like you're not alone in this,
Mhm.
and there's other people who are going through it or have gone through it in order to see it. And I think now, because of the boom of social media and stuff like TikTok, you also have to kind of weed through like, is this really the best route? Is this the best option? Or like, are they actually telling me the truth on there? So I
Mhm.
love how like everything that you guys do is very evidence based and clinical research, and you have professionals. And I would love to have you share a little bit more about what types of professionals. I know we kind of listed off a few in the beginning, but like what kind of professionals are a part of Avocado Health so that our moms listening know that they're getting actual real expert advice?
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Trust is at the epicenter of everything that we do. And we know that trust is such a high valued commodity, right? Where we're live in this world where you don't know where to trust, who to turn to. There's lots of, fakes. It's very easy to have a fake AI image, this, that, and the other, out there. And that creates anxiety, that creates confusion, that creates, sometimes angst. And that creates a lot of this user behavior where moms and dads are going down the rabbit hole of looking for information, not sure, well, this article says this thing, this other influencer says that thing, and this community group says, X, Y, and Z. And I do think community is very important. But what really is important for parents is, knowing who to trust and who to turn to. And a lot of times that is their local pediatrician when it comes to certainly medical questions. Maybe they have a parent coach, maybe they have a father or mother themselves that can give that advice. But um, we think about how do we actually build that trust with our users coming from a standstill of starting point of zero, right? The users don't know about us, but for us, it's okay. There's credible sources of information out there, right? The American Academy of Pediatrics, as I said, and others. We're a team of pediatricians, child eye specialists, perinatal specialists, ABA, BCBA specialists. Like there's parent coaches, right? And for us, we've curated a knowledge base where we've asked them, what do you give your patients and where do you send them when they're writing to you on their My Chart? What articles are you giving to them? And for us, you know, our job is to really mimic that in a way that no, this is not clinical advice. We're not going to give you a diagnosis, but real primary care, starts with the parent. The parent has to be the one to make that decision to go to the ER, to call a pediatrician or triage it at home. In many cases, we know 40% of ER visits are avoidable, preventable if they just have the information at home. And so we see Avocado Health as a parent coach in your pocket, yes, but it really is a parent decision support platform.
Yeah.
And there's a term in the medical parlance, clinical decision support platform. But for us, it's how do we actually distill, what's right, what's wrong, and really get that evidence base. The other thing that we do is we make sure that we provide the underlying source articles in the text response that we give them. So they can go directly to the source, right? You can only write so much on a text message, but there's a much deeper knowledge base behind that. And then finally, we understand the intuition around that question, right? And that's one thing that AI can do very well is infer. So if a mom, says that, hey, my 25-month-old isn't speaking yet, I'm not sure what to do. Should I be concerned? A lot of times that's going to be overlooked, even on the provider side, unfortunately, if they see a provider. But we know that that is, a delay, and that's a red flag. And, we'll not only answer that question and here's what you can do, and we lead with empathy, but we'll also put them in touch with the local early intervention center, something that 90% of parents don't even know about. These are services that can give that free evaluation, can give free therapy, speech therapy, autism, whatever it is. It's really incumbent on the parents to really seek that out as it is right now. But we think it should be much simpler so that the parents can only ask that question and then be served the right type of resources at the right time based on their geolocation. So they don't have to, keep going down that rabbit hole. And the final thing I'll say is we take the risk of AI very seriously and the risk of, hallucination. And so we literally put constraints and guardrails around it such that if we don't have that underlying source knowledge in our database, which again is curated, then we're literally going to say we don't know the answer to this. And I think it's important for AI models to do that proactively, especially those that are trained on one specific subject area. For us, it's parenting, right? Um, because if you ask us why is the sky blue, we'll literally come back to you and say we have no idea. Um, it's not really, in our wheelhouse. And so we want to be hyper specific on the subject matter that we want to be experts in.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So it kind of sounds though that, and I just want to make sure like my listeners understand like the power behind this platform too. It sounds like you provide some milestone stuff, but also are there for those random questions of like, oh my gosh, why is this happening? Correct?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, I, we've looked at a lot of our users that really gravitate to what we're doing, and there's a few different kind of personas. Those that have the middle of the night question or the middle of the afternoon question of like, what's this rash about? Or like, the 1 or 2 degree fever. Like, is this something that should I go to urgent care? Should I take off work? If I go to the ER, is it going to be 6 hours, right? But is there something I can do? Can I give them a little Tylenol, right? And these are sources from from those credible places. But then but then making sure that, or the other side is, the developmental and behavior delays. So we know ADHD or autism or speech or dyslexia, right? There's lots of different types where parents face a lot of emotions when it comes down to it: stigma, shame, denial, fear, guilt. And for those reasons, a lot of times they shut down. They don't want to talk about it. And they go to the provider, they see the pediatrician, maybe they run out of time, but maybe there's a lot of, there's a hurdle that you have to kind of cross as a parent to even say, hey, my kid's doing this, weird motion. Like, is this something that I should be concerned about? That takes some confidence. And for us, we want to give them that confidence to be proactive about that, because waiting usually isn't advisable. It's usually better upfront, but also give them the credibility of like, hey, I've read this, I've seen this, and you wouldn't imagine like how many hundreds of pediatricians we talk to, and they say, I would have done something sooner had mom or dad said something to me.
Mm.
And, the alternative is parents a lot of times are just going on Google at 9 o'clock at night and going down that rabbit hole rather than even asking, their provider that day. So, that small subtle decision, right? And the
Yeah.
change in mindset, change in behavior. Do I ask? Don't I ask? That's what we're talking about. And that's that gray area. And that's persistent in, the pregnancy journey where, a UTI or a blurry vision after giving birth. Like that could be a sign of preeclampsia, right? That could be fatal. And many times it is. And whether a mom is asking about that or saying that, or should I be concerned about that? There's a lot of things that can be prevented and avoided if they had that information, right? So, those are two different examples, but we see a lot of our user base, pregnancy, birth, first 5 years. That's really kind of the majority, but we go all the way up to the teenage years as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to get to that too, but I did want to say, like, I'm really glad that you brought up that point because I think sometimes we have, we're kind of saving up all these questions when we bring our babies in for like the wellness check, and we're like, okay, we're gonna ask about this, and this, and then we walk out of the appointment and we're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to ask about that. Now I'm gonna have to wait until the next visit, or I'm gonna have to go to Google. So I love how you have that ability to really provide them not even just information, but some reassurance as well, and kind of a form of community that they can get those answers in between those. But I'm glad that you brought up the teenage stuff because, yeah, you're right. You guys don't just focus on like the pregnancy and the younger children. You guys go all the way to teens, which I'm excited that you mentioned because I know there's some listeners on here right now who's like, we are so out of the baby stage, but like the teenage stage is a whole
Yeah.
nother beast now. So can
Yeah.
you just comment on a little bit of maybe some questions or concerns or things that you're helping teenage parents with or parents of teenagers?
Yeah. Or even the tween
Oh,
age, right?
send
Right
help.
before,
I'm there.
which my kids are getting to that age. But when it comes down to it, it's really, there's lots of different issues, right? Whether it's, screen time. We just had a a workshop. So speaking of building community, we have free weekly workshops across the board. And so we just had one on teenage anxiety and really managing that. And how do we spot that? How do we,
Yeah.
support your teenager in a non-judgmental way? Not going with recommendations and judgment and do this and do that, but more of let's talk and
Yeah.
let me listen. And it's more about listening, right? And being there and and holding your tongue a little bit, not doing the recommendations across the board. But teenagers are going through a lot, and especially in a screen first world, um, there's obviously lots of recommendations on that, but how do we actually, as parents, relate to our teenagers and maintain a relationship with them, and especially during a time period where they're shutting down or they're getting, more self-conscious, more self-aware. There's probably that's more important then than ever to be present in their lives, because we see a shift in that orb of influence if you will, shifting from parents, at being the biggest influencer on that child's, overall being to the friend group, right? The best friends are, a lot more influential. Maybe some others, coaches, this, that, and the other. Um, they kind of start becoming, the go-to, the trusted source that these teenagers are going to. So, how do we actually manage a conflict? How do you open the dialogue? How do you actually, um, you know, be the best parent that you can be during those ages? We know there's lots of different questions. It's not an easy stage from what I've heard. This is not from experience, um, but I also remember when I was a teenager as well. Certainly, there's a lot of fighting, this, that, and the other. But it's yeah, it's really important just to um, communicate in general. So
Oh, yes, it is. But yeah, preteen stuff is just starting around here. So I might
mhm.
be jumping on Avocado Health even as a parent coach to get some other perspectives tool because we can always use more tools in our toolbox. So
Yeah.
um,
And I did want to say, Andrew, one other thing that, often comes up, and honestly, like my wife and I are some of the biggest users of avocado because many times we have disagreements in our household. If you have a partner or, husband or wife or whatever, like being able to have kind of a non-judgmental third party voice, not in the room, but that you can actually go back on to say, one of the arguments that we kind of complain about is how much screen time they should get. And I'm like, well, she's like 15 minutes. It's usually 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but like 15 minutes a day. Um, but my thing is like, well, it should be a little bit, it should be after the chores are done and they've taken a bath and they've eaten their dinner. And then that's the reward, versus, coming home from school and just getting on a screen, right? So that there's differences that, there's some bickering, there's, passive aggressiveness, this, that, and the other, maybe with a partner, but sometimes it can be resolved, by just having, okay, so what does Abba think on this situation? But
yeah.
not as a mediator, but more of an impartial kind of third party. Um, again, following kind of best practices. And so obviously, if there's two different sides, it's not always going to be, it'll probably be on one side or the other. So, yeah.
I love that. I love it. Well, I think that probably intrigued people a little bit more because every house is going to have bickering and fighting sometimes.
Mhm.
It's hard to live with people, whether it's your kids or it's your partner. We talk about that a lot in our house of it's not always easy living together. And maybe that would be a good tiebreaker is Avocado Health. So,
Yeah.
Hans, thank you so much for sharing all this information and your story and your inspiration behind this platform. Of course, I'm sure my listeners right now are like, okay, I need to go check this out. So where should they go?
Yeah, so it is avocadohealth.ai. So that's important, avocadohealth.ai. And you can find us there. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions as well. So Hans at avocadohealth.ai as well. I'm happy to answer on email. And then our Instagram handle is avocado underscore family underscore health. So longer title there, but that is our IG. We have weekly workshops, as I said, and so that's one way to kind of just get a taste of who we are, like the real life humans behind the scene and who've created it. Um, and feel free to come on there, regardless of the topic. We always have topics, whether it's temper tantrums or sleep training or whatever it is. But come on there and ask away. Ask if you've ever wanted to talk to a child specialist, they're amazing. Um, and certainly, we're here to be a resource. And my biggest motivation is really just to help one parent. And if I can help one family, one parent, then that's all the difference here at Avocado.
I love that. Very cool. Well, listeners, make sure you head to the show notes. I'm going to have all of the information in there so that you can just go click and you can go check it out, look at those weekly workshops, get connected with Hans, check out the app, or sorry, not the app, the platform, and feel really like you do have that support that you're not going through it alone because we know at Mom Essentials here on the podcast, we talk all about empowerment, not perfection. So this is another great tool to have in your toolbox. So Hans, thank you again for spending some time with me and my listeners. And listeners, stick around for the Essential Minute coming up next, and we will see you next time on Mom Essentials. Hello. Hello and thanks for sticking around for the Essential Minute. Today's conversation with Hans was such a good reminder that parenting is full of moments when we just need a little bit more support. You know it, the 2 a.m. fever, the Google spiral, the tween mood swings that come out of absolutely nowhere. I think we've all been in one of those situations, or maybe all of them. And this is exactly why I wanted to pair today's episode with Serenity, doTERRA's restful blend. Now, Serenity is a beautiful mix of calming oils like lavender, cedarwood, hoe wood, and so many others. Now, most people know it because it helps you fall asleep. And yes, it absolutely does that. But it's also a powerhouse for those high emotion moments when you just need to come back to yourself. So I'm going to share with you 3 simple ways you can use it. 1, you can literally put it in your diffuser, especially during those witching hours between 5 and 7 when everyone seems to be running on low. The whole room just fills with this amazing smell. The second is that you can apply it to your wrist or on the back of your neck. Now, you can definitely try this too to pair it with 3 deep breaths, especially when you're trying to reach for your phone and you're about to go to Google. It'll help really calm you down. Now, the third way is to actually apply to the bottom of your feet before bed so you can get the rest your nervous system needs to show up tomorrow. Now, if you want to grab up this oil and add it as a tool in your parenting toolbox, head to the show notes and click on the link. Happy oiling. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mom Essentials. If you're looking for simple ways to bring more communication, connection, and calm into your home, head to theparenttoolbox.info and check out the Calm Family Planner. And as a special thanks for being a listener, you can take $5 off with the code ESSENTIALS. That's code ESSENTIALS. Want more tips in between episodes? Follow us on Instagram at The Parent Toolbox. See you next time.